candlelit vigil in Lima to mark the opening of this summit. The somber mood reflected the seriousness of what lies ahead. Representatives of all the countries of the world are here. This is being billed as the beginning of the final push to reduce the carbon emissions that threaten future generations.
It has never been clearer that the window of opportunity to reduce the emissions will close soon.
The world's two biggest carbon polluters, China and the United States, have already set out their own plans for contributing to the cleanup.
People here, both the public and the government officials, realize that the addiction on coal consumption, which contributes more than half of the air pollutants here in China, is not sustainable anymore.
Thank you, everybody.
In a pre-summit deal which has given fresh impetus to this meeting, the US agreed its carbon emissions will be cut by as much as 28% by 2025.
It's probably one of the three most significant things the administration has done on climate change, but this will probably be the most controversial and the most significant.
China said its emissions will peak and begin to decline by 2030.
That we have better tomorrow.
First, the 195 nations represented must agree on a clear and transparent way by which they will report the progress or otherwise on their national pledges to reduce greenhouse gases.
There is no room for coal in the future energy system unless it is accompanied with very robust carbon capture, use, and storage technology. Unabated coal has no room in the future energy system.
The delegations also have to hammer out a workable negotiating text that it is hoped will be agreed by world leaders in Paris next year.
For the sake of our families' health and for our kids' future, we have a moral obligation to act on climate.
The talks take place amid grim scientific warnings. There is near total consensus that current pollution-reducing measures will not stop the planet from warming more than 2 degrees Celsius from its pre-industrial temperature. The fear is that any further warming will breach a tipping point of no return.
There's a very strong argument that's been made recently by many scientists about the fact that extreme weather can be one of the consequences of the climatic change.
One relatively immediate effect of temperature rise is expected to be a progressive melting of polar ice sheets, raising world sea levels and causing widespread flooding.
If all of it would melt tomorrow, it would raise global sea levels with about 7 meters. All right, that's a lot of water, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen over the next 100 years. But even just a fraction of that amount of ice melting over the next 50 years could have consequences for people living everywhere on the globe.
These Brazilian scientists have been collecting data in the Antarctic for the past 8 years.
There is very little human interference in Antarctica. The environment is much more sensitive to climate evolution, so here we can determine very clearly if climate change really does exist.
Studying that data is an extraordinarily painstaking process. This team expects it will be 30 years before it can make a definitive conclusion on the nature of climate change and what is causing it.
Last year, we recorded a low temperature of -93 degrees. This is one example of climate change. But whether this is due to meteorological cycles or because of human activity, it's still too early to say.
The world's most climate vulnerable countries, mainly small island states and coastal African nations, say they do not have 30 years to wait. They are lobbying to uphold a tougher maximum warming target of 1.5 degrees Celsius.
And the governments of developing countries, such as here in Brazil, want the world's old established economies to be far more specific about how they intend to honour one of their key promises to the developing world.
A green climate fund is designed to offset the fact that the developed countries progressed at great cost to the environment. If they now want developing countries to be less polluting as they grow, they will have to subsidize green projects like solar and wind farms.
Close to $9.4 billion of contributions make this the most successful climate finance mobilization effort within a very short time, and we will continue to work with additional countries to make, and additional non-traditional contributors to make contributions to the fund.
The organisers of this conference say the effects of climate change will soon be felt on the economies of many nations. The International Development Bank estimates global warming could cost Latin America and the Caribbean $100 billion by 2050.
Climate change is a defining issue of our time, and there is no time to lose. If we do not take action now, we will have to pay much more.
The UN argues that there is an ethical, economic and scientific imperative for an agreement unlike anything the world has seen on an issue which is a common threat to humanity. Over the next week, we will know to what extent that call has been heard.
America's Now.